Alrighty. Again, like I said last week, y'all guys are gonna kill me. Just saying.
Sounds like a personal problem.
Did she say we're gonna feel her?
Kill
kill
me. K-I-L-L. You guys are gonna kill me.
You don't pay me enough to do that, so I don't know.
It still sounds like a personal problem.
Probably.
Have you offended my delicate sensibilities?
You have those?
I'm not sure. You know, I'm pretty sure I don't have them along with virtues.
Okay, so we are starting now, so sheesh. I'm just kidding. Hello everybody, welcome to week 2, or episode 2 of the podcast of Geeks and Things. I am your host, Sister Salem. As I said last week, everybody calls me Salem, so y'all might as well too. My host for this week is going to be Jessie Cool. Yes, Jessie, that's your cue to say hi. Okay, that'll work. Matt Feldman.
Hey, everybody.
And Miss Rachel Rae.
Hello.
Hello. And this week's episode and topic was changed from what we were originally going to do to, with the whole, your favorite creepypasta story, to we changed it to what is your favorite medium in the fantasy genre. And for this week, our guest is, once again, our resident Canuck, Chris.
Yo, yo, yo.
He's my favorite.
And our resident Arizonian, Shaddris, who Chris and I and Jessie knows from playing Final Fantasy XIV.
What? Arizona? Wait a minute.
I don't like you. You're different. I don't
No,
like
New
different
Mexico.
things.
Is it Arizona or New Mexico?
It's New Mexico.
Oh, no, okay. Sorry.
It's
New
107
Mexico.
out here.
And then...
Yeah, but it's a dry heat.
You're in the middle of the damn desert.
Right. And then, for me, a very special guest on the show today with us is the person who introduced me to the world of all things fantasy by telling me about the D&D Dragonlance books, with the primary character that he absolutely loves, Bracelin Magier, is Mr. Stewart.
Hello, hello.
Not gonna lie, I was half expecting him to start talking with a British accent and tell me to destroy the Klingons.
But if it's not Scottish, it's crap.
So, yes, Stewart introduced me to the world of fantasy when I was 16, and it's been... I've been hooked ever since. So, almost 30 years? I'm showing my age?
Yes. and I'm the one to blame, so you can all just blame me.
Yes.
God, Salem, you're that old?
Shut.
You have my condolences.
So, how you guys doing today?
Not too bad.
Damn hot.
Yes, it
Well,
is.
aside from that,
It
got
is.
the AC blowing, got a fan blowing on me, and it's still hot inside.
Yeah, see, I'm happy I sit right underneath my AC, so...
Yeah, no, once it gets over a certain point, the AC it cools it down a little bit, but it's still hot.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, when
So...
it's almost 90 degrees in Canada, you know it's warm.
Yeah, it's gonna be like 92 tomorrow here, so... I would like to also take the opportunity, even though I know this is gonna get posted up on Tuesday, to tell everybody Happy Father's Day. If you're a father, stepfather, or whatever, Happy Father's Day to you guys.
Bah humbug.
The world should all be saying thank you to me for the fact that I have not cursed the planet with my spawn.
I have to agree with Jesse on that.
I've already done it twice.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
I have 4, so...
Yeah, but
I
you're
can just
nice,
see
so
it.
I'm not going to make a smart-ass comment.
I'm just hearing spawn more overlords.
I can see it now. People are gonna be like, "Oh, your kids are so cute." I'm gonna look at them and go, "Are you crazy? They will eat you."
Oh no, your thing's gonna be, oh, your kids are so cute. Too bad they're the Antichrist.
At least.
I'm breeding my children to be an army of sociopaths.
Of what?
To what?
An army of sociopaths.
Oh, sociopaths. Okay.
I thought you said sex maniac.
And once again, chat is broken. Pardon me.
Didn't
Okay.
take long, did it?
No, it didn't take long at all. Like I said,
That's my
it's
second time breaking it today.
right, and it's usually Shaddris that breaks chat. So.
You got competition now, Shad.
No, wait till we get to the late night chat in game.
Oh Lord.
Why leave it to late night chat? I'll do it any time of the day.
Because we're being kind of polite here, we have an audience that might be a little sensitive to these things. We never know.
Sounds like a personal problem.
Yeah, it does sound like a personal problem. I agree with Chris on this.
I will let you guys know, parental advisory. You know that this is not a this is a not safe for work show, and a not safe for kids show.
Unless you really don't care.
Unless you really don't care, yeah.
Yeah,
At
you don't
which
mind
point,
the internet
titties
sex
for everybody.
going on.
Titties and beer, titties and beer. All I want is titties and beer.
I want tits and dragons.
Oh
So
jeez, well, go watch.
That's
Game
pretty
of
much
Thrones.
all the old AD&D artwork that you ever saw.
Yeah.
oh goodness gracious. Okay, so
Great Balls 5.
favorite medium in the fantasy genre. To start things off, I would have to say there isn't a favorite that I don't have. I love reading fantasy books. I obviously roleplay in the fantasy genre. Started off with D&D and kind of worked my way through the different gaming type areas that you have, like Warhammer and all that other stuff. I've played WoW and now currently play Final Fantasy XIV, so that kind of goes in it. Yes, I very much raise my nerd flag and let it fly proudly. Thank you very much. Movies, you know, whatever, TV shows. If it's fantasy, I absolutely love it. I'm actually right now working on creating my own realm for a book series that I'm going to start writing here very soon.
Hi, Matt Feldman, your new publisher.
And it's I'm hoping to get it off the ground here very, very soon. Like, I've had a lot of help with it. Chris has helped me with it some. Jesse has helped me with it some. Here, when I started it a couple years ago, Matt helped me, like, bounce ideas off of him and everything. So, I mean, yeah, that's just, if it's fantasy and fantasy based, I'm all over it. So.
Geez, you're gonna have a lot of people to thank when it comes time to actually writing a book.
God, I know, right? So, I'll have that.
Cut of the royalties too, then?
No.
See, now, how is that fair?
You want royalties, you gotta talk to the publisher. Hi.
Hook me up, buddy.
Dude, I started my company with no money. You think I have money now? I don't.
Well, that's okay. Just wait till, you know, Matt hears that it's going to be 5 separate trilogies and then an ending trilogy, so 6 total.
So, get you on a 12-year contract. Got it.
So, anyways, that's where my, you know, with the help of, like I said, Mr. Stewart, that's where my love of all things fantasy come from. I mean, hell, I used to LARP also, like back in the day when LARPing was really, really big.
Still is, actually.
It still is, but unfortunately it's not in the area that I live in. And yes, Jesse, the nerd is strong with this one. You are not any worse off than I am, my dear.
Going to LARP, she does.
I can honestly say I have never LARPed. I don't have any desire to, but hey, if that's what you're into, do you, boo-boo.
I'm not allowed.
Well, Jesse, what's your favorite medium for the fantasy genre?
Science fiction, hands down.
Completely different genre.
Yep. Completely different genre.
That's my favorite when it comes to fantasy. You want to talk about sci-fi? I'm all about it. The fantasy stuff,
Do you read Warhammer at all?
Truth be told, I actually have no fucking idea what that is.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Okay.
Well, no,
You
technically,
don't know what you're missing
science
out
fiction
on.
can be part of the fantasy genre, considering what it can do.
Go to your local gaming store and ask them what Warhammer is, and I think you would fall in love with 40K.
Or fantasy, either one.
Yeah.
I don't know about y'all, but I was playing Epic for a while. Way too much fun and way too much money.
I honestly wish they'd come out with a game based in the fantasy part of Warhammer,
They
personally.
did, actually. I own it. Fantasy Flight Games published it.
Exactly. It's been
I
over
did not know
years.
that. So,
They just stopped making stuff for it, that's all.
They lost the contract,
gotcha.
That's why. Warhammer is its own publisher now. They have their own gaming stores. Like, you walk in and it's like Warhammer, and that's it. That's all they sell.
Nice. I remember when I lived in Topeka, Kansas, there was this one gaming place that I used to go to all the time, and it was kind of a cross between, it was a conglomerated mixture of Warhammer, D&D, and White Wolf. So you walked in and like there was one wall that was nothing but Warhammer, the other wall nothing but D&D, and then the third wall was, White Wolf stuff with like, Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf the Apocalypse, and Mage the Ascension and stuff like that. So, but then they had their
What confused me was when you said fantasy. For me, the term fantasy means anything that is not reality.
Well, I mean,
So sci-fi to me is technically part of fantasy.
That, I can see where you're coming from, Jesse, because if you go to most bookstores and you go to the fantasy section, sci-fi's in it.
yeah, I mean, you make a very valid point. It is,
Same for Warhammer 40K is a lot of fantasy as much as it is science fiction.
Yeah, that's very, very true. So, I mean,
So,
if
yeah,
we
I can kind of see where you're coming from.
yeah, I mean, if we go along that vein of it, I mean, I've even, played Star Wars games, the original Star Wars tabletop. That wasn't the D20, it was you actually had pips that you had to worry about with experience, and then it switched to a D20 system. What was the other one? The one that had all the battle mechs and everything.
Battletech?
No, it wasn't Battletech, it was the other one.
Mech Warrior?
Yeah, Mech Warrior.
Mech Warrior and Battletech are the same.
Oh, are they?
Yes.
Oh.
Battletech is the tabletop combat game, miniature combat game, and Battletech was the RPG for it.
Oh, okay. I just remember, like, I think my favorite house was, like, the House of the Jade Raven or some shit like that.
Jade Falcon.
Well, like I said, or something like that. Ghost Wolf, I remember very, very clearly. That was my second favorite. So, Mr. Matt, what is your favorite medium of fantasy?
I mean, like you, it encompasses a lot, but I really prefer the fiction aspect of it. My top three being the Gunslinger 7-book saga by Stephen King.
I'm currently reading that right now, actually.
Yeah, The Man in Black Fled Across the Desert. The Dresden Files, and the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Well, you can't not be a fantasy fan and not like anything Tolkien's wrote.
Just put Warhammer Fantasy, the book series, in there, and you're good.
Yeah, I mean, if you're being a fantasy fan, you can't be a viable, and this is just, mind you guys, this is all just my opinion. You can't be a viable fantasy fan without being a Tolkien fan. I mean, you just can't. I mean, he's the grandfather.
Without liking Game of Thrones.
The books? I thought the books were very incredibly long-winded. I couldn't get through them.
Well, I mean both, like TV show and books.
I could not get through season 1. I've seen season 1 of Game of Thrones, and that's just like where my interest stopped. I tried starting season 2. I think I got like 2 episodes in, and I'm like, okay, I'm bored, and walked away.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, I still watch it from time to time with a buddy of mine, but beyond that, it's one of those, it's not really just because they have tits and dragons does not make it fantasy.
Well, okay. No, it depends on what your definition of fantasy. High fantasy, technically, Lord of the Rings isn't even considered high fantasy.
That's very true. I mean,
Yeah.
are we talking about high fantasy or just fantasy in general?
Both. I mean, it's encompassing everything. High fantasy, low fantasy, Tolkien fantasy, whatever.
Well, then, yeah, I just named all mine.
So, Miss Rachel?
Honestly, my mediums for fantasy kind of cover everything. Books, movies, games. I really don't have a particular one. Like where Matt was mentioning about Warhammer, Dark Tower and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have one particular one. I'm kind of a fan of all of it. I'm like, the jack of all trades, master of none for it.
Right.
If a fantasy is really engaging, I'll watch it, I'll read it, that kind of thing.
I would have to honestly say, I think if you take a look at it and break it down, mine is more the reading aspect of it or the movie. Now, I will say, I think I was one of the only few people who, at first, I had no desire to go see The Hobbit. I don't know why. I think, to me, when movies like that, even though they're great epic books, some of them tend to not come across the screen quite as well.
They lose some
translate
of their
poorly.
context.
Yeah, it translates poorly, and I think a lot of it was the hype. A lot of the hype that it got was like, The Hobbit's coming out, and this was, 5 or 6 years after they had already wrapped up the Lord of the Rings trilogy movies. It was just kind of one of those things where I'm like, yeah, I'm not too keen on seeing this. I'm not going, want to go above and beyond. If it comes out on Redbox, sure, I'll go watch it, but only then. Well, then it came out on Redbox, and my husband went to go pick it up, and I think it was after this, when the second one came out, the second Hobbit. I finally, when it came out on Redbox, I had both, for the first one and the second one. And I watched it, and I was like, okay, I'm hooked. I should have seen this when it came out. And then the third one came out, and I'm the type where, a lot of people don't know this, I suffer really badly from social anxiety. So for me to go to the movies to actually watch a movie, when we went to go see Deadpool, was the first time in 4 years I've actually been to a movie theater, and I had to be severely medicated when I went. But I waited for that one to come out on Redbox too. So, and I'm glad I waited, but then again, at the same time, I wish I had gone to see them. Now, I did go see the very last Harry Potter movie on the midnight showing of opening day. So that was the last movie that I had seen before we went to go see Deadpool. So, pardon me. Mr. Stewart.
Well, I think everybody is going to say the same thing. We all kind of dabble in every genre as far as every medium as far as fantasy goes. But I would have to say my top 3 would be books, movies, and video games. A little bit. My number 1 would definitely be books. There's nothing better for me than reading a book and still writing my book that I shared with you before. So definitely books.
I think that's where a lot of people actually start off with, or at least people of our generation, like the older people, you're 25 and up, start off with books. We all started off with books, and then, of course we have the movies and, everything like that. And then, the gaming, it's oddly enough, our next podcast is going to be, Final Fantasy XIV, the MMO versus WoW. So, I mean, you've got two huge companies, that has gone through and made fantasy like an everyday thing for people, even the non-geeks and non-nerds and people like that. You've got people who play Final Fantasy XIV. You've got people who plays WoW, and they sit and they go, well, where did the idea for this come from? I mean, and to me, everything traces back to Tolkien and The Hobbit and then The Lord of the Rings. That is just my opinion. Now, maybe they had it around, before Tolkien actually wrote it down into, physical verbal form in books, but it just, to me, that's where it traces back to. And you've got people playing these games who had no idea but really about the genre. At first when they look at it, they're like, oh, you guys are a bunch of nerds, and I don't know about anybody else, but in high school days, when I was in high school, it was, if you were part of the nerd fan and the nerd crowd, you were like an outcast. And nowadays it's more to be a nerd or to be a geek is more mainstream than it used to be. But you still have your jocks and your cheerleaders and your popular kids and everything like that. But it just, back in the day, it was, being nerdy was not cool. And nowadays you find it everywhere,
So when did that change? When did, I'm going to ask this to the group, when did being a nerd become cool? Was it Bill Gates? Was it something? What is it?
I don't think it was any of that. I think it was when they started making comic books into movies, and people started going to see those comic book movies. Like Blade was one of the first ones. Some of you guys are older than I am, and I don't mean that disrespectfully. I mean that with complete respect. For me, Blade was the first comic book movie that I actually saw.
Well, I mean, if you're going to go like that, that's not entirely true either, because if you go back to the 50s, 60s, and 70s, you had, like, Batman,
Superman.
Well, I mean, okay, if you go movies, Batman.
That's true, the 89 Batman.
Yeah. What about Revenge of the Nerds?
Yeah, Revenge of the Nerds. Weird Science.
Yeah.
Those are basically the movies that really kind of started it, but TV had a lot to do with it also. Buffy, Supernatural, things like that.
I think being a part of this genre that we're all in actually became more mainstream in the mid-90s-ish. I mean, because like Matt said, you had Buffy the Vampire Slayer that came out. You had the spin-off of that being Angel, and then Supernatural, started in the early 2000s, and just a whole bunch of different shows that, encompassed that the term fantasy. And so, I mean, it kind of, yeah, I would say probably about the mid to late 90s is when it became more mainstream than anything else. I mean, and to Chris to throw in another one that was a TV show long before it came out into the movies, Wonder Woman was a TV show, I mean, and there wasn't a weekend, there wasn't a Sunday that didn't go by that my ass wasn't sitting in front of the television watching Linda Carter do her little spinny thing, turning from Diana into Wonder Woman and then flying in her invisible jet somewhere.
Dare I throw out also Fantasy Island?
Yeah, I'll give you that one too.
Yeah, but was that really fantasy like how we're talking, or was it fantasy of love type thing?
Some episodes I think could be classified as fantasy for sure. Others not so much.
It was a wish fulfillment in many ways, and oftentimes what you wish for, you probably don't want.
The other thing that did was, the other thing I might have had a big impact was 80s cartoons.
Yeah.
Like G.I. Joe, like Transformers, like the original Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. I'm really dating myself here.
I know, dude, because I remember watching that show on Saturday morning.
What's that?
I'm carbon dating you both.
Oh, don't hate on Uni.
What's that? Don't hate on what, Jeff?
Don't hate on Uni.
Yeah, don't be dissing Uni.
I'm just saying.
You know, and I really think it started back then. I think people were aware of it back then, but until we hit the internet age, the age of information, I think that's what really solidified it, where people were like, wow, we need to know more. And they found themselves wanting more documentaries and more information from everywhere, and they realized that they themselves were actually nerds.
Well, go ahead, Chris.
Okay, I know you guys were talking about older fantasy, and you guys mentioned some of the older books like Tolkien. I got an older one. How about Beowulf and Grendel?
Yeah?
A very good example.
It's the oldest story in the English language.
And the Odyssey.
Yeah, the Odyssey.
Odyssey, yeah. You guys got a very valid point.
The Iliad.
The Iliad, Arthurian legends.
Yeah.
We've had it throughout history. Fantasy is not new to the last century and a half. I mean, hell, you could throw the original Bram Stoker's Dracula and
Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Into fantasy.
When you look at Greek theater, same thing. This is way back before we had anything remotely technological.
Well, and that's true. And going back to that, I remember in like the mid to late 80s. Well, I mean, not even that. No, it was after I really got into the fantasy genre pretty hardcore. I remember going back and reading stories and information of, for the longest time, D&D had a very bad rep, because a lot of your quote-unquote churchgoers was, and a lot of your church pastors and stuff like that was taking a look at this game, not realizing that's what it was. It was nothing but a game, and saying it was the devil's work, and it's like, dude, it's a game. Are there people who took it too far? Absolutely. There's a movie out there that, in fact, stars Anthony Edwards, about he was a guy who got too far into his fantasy world, and that became his reality. He lost himself in the fantasy reality because it became his real life reality. And so for the longest time, it took gaming companies like D&D, like, Warhammer and stuff like that, coming out of a quote-unquote dark age, because you had so many of these Christian-based religions that were just going through and vilifying.
Tipper Gore.
Tipper Gore. I mean, they were vilifying a game. Like, it's not the gaming company's fault that your child is now stuck in this fantasy world. That's something, and don't get me wrong, I'm not downing, mental disabilities. I deal with mental issues myself on a daily basis. I'm on medication for them, but that's what they were doing. They were taking this, and their children were getting involved, and I honestly think had a lot to do with the fact of, especially in the D&D realms, there was different gods and goddesses, and I think they truly and honestly believed that gaming companies like is it Wizards Coast is what it's called?
Wizards of the Coast.
TSR, Wizards of the Coast purchased the rights for
Dungeons and Dragons in
Yeah.
the early 90s, if I remember correctly.
Yes. Yep. So at first, they were blaming companies like TSR for turning their children to the devil, and that's what they were opening themselves up to, things that were unnatural. And then we had it again in this day and age. We had it again when Harry Potter came out. You had a lot of your Christian-based churches going around and screaming, Bloody Mary, because this woman wrote this book series about wizards and magic and stuff like that. And it's like, why? It's fantasy. And I mean, if you want to talk about a high fantasy series, Harry Potter fits that bill perfectly. And it just, a lot of it came from the United States. Like in the other countries, you didn't hear about this. Like, it didn't get vilified in like Europe or Canada or England and any other countries like that. It was only in the U.S.
I think it did, but to a much, much smaller extent.
Okay, I'll give you that one. What were you gonna say, Stuart?
I was just gonna say, it was demonized because there were demons in all of it. Every single thing it had demons, and it wasn't just the magic. Growing up, we played Dungeons and Dragons at my house, and some parents were okay with it. We had to invite certain ones, and certain ones we weren't allowed to because of that.
Right. And I remember walking through the mall with you, and there was a new book with Raceland coming out there that had come out like that day. And I remember walking through the mall with you going to get that book, just so you know.
Wow, that's awesome.
I also remember opening weekend of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
You'll have to like me on that one later.
No, we just that we went to go see that when it came out.
Oh yeah.
So like I said, Stuart was the one that got me involved in it. Y'all can all blame him.
So I guess a question I'd like to pose is, we all talked about, how it started. Of course, it started with books, which that's the only way that ideas were communicated back then. But now we've gone through the radio age where you had War of the Worlds, and now you're into movies, and you got the internet, computers. Where does everyone think fantasy world's going to go from here? Virtual reality?
VR.
Yep.
Oculus Rift. Sony has their Mobius, and I think there's 2 others that are on the horizon to be built.
Yep, it's going to go to VR.
I mean, everything's going that way, so it's only a matter of time, I think.
I'm not thrilled about it.
I don't know. Like, I think it would be kind of cool to play a game, like Final Fantasy XIV or WoW or any other MMO, and have it be a literally immersible game.
Well, that's one of the differences you'll see. There are some people that definitely like to just kind of watch the fantasy unfold either in a book or on the screen, and then there's other people, myself included, who like to actually get involved in it.
Mm-hmm.
I won't be able to. Seizure problem.
Yeah, I can see, I can see Matt's point of view. If you're someone who suffers from seizures, like Matt does, that's VR is not going to be a good thing for people who do that, but who have the problems with epilepsy and other types of seizure disorders. But I think that's where it's going to go, is VR. And I mean, you're still, like Shad said, you're still going to have those people that are going to buck against the system. It's going to be why fix what's not broken. It's not a question of it being, working correctly or it being broken. It's taking that next step. you know, of where do we go from here? Okay, well, we go to virtual reality. We give people a way to immerse themselves into the story.
You'll see some of that. One thing I have noticed in the last, say, 5 years is some people are very much bucking that trend, and you know what a big thing that shows that is the continued success of World of Warcraft, even though it's definitely showing its age now.
Yeah, I remember
newer games out there now.
Yeah, I mean, you can ask Stewart, I was a hardcore WoW player, for 10 years. And it just, I started playing the game 6 months after it came out. And for like the first 6 months, I bucked against actually playing it because it was so mainstream. I guess, like, to everybody that I talked to, they were talking about this game called World of Warcraft, and like, I wanted nothing to do with it.
That was the funny part, because when you look at what Blizzard said about it, they never expected it to go mainstream. They expected maybe 200,000 players like you saw with EverQuest.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it ended up at its highest point of, what, close to 11 million?
12.
Yep.
12. It was over 12 million subscribers that they had. And then Final Fantasy hit. But then you have all these other MMOs that came out, too, that just did not come up to par with what Blizzard was giving us with WoW. I mean, you had Rift, that was claiming to be the next game that was gonna, tear down.
Don't remind me about that one.
I played it.
Yeah, I mean, you had Rift that was like, we're gonna be the next WoW. Failed miserably.
And now free to play.
Okay,
and
but there's okay. Like, did it fail? The damn game's still in run. It's still being.
I would argue it didn't fail. It didn't hit the popularity targets that people wanted it to, but it's still making enough money to keep the servers on.
Yeah, and they're producing more and more content every single day for it.
You don't have to pay for it. That's the weird thing.
Yeah, and it's arguably, as far as MMOs goes, got probably the best free-to-play system in MMOs today.
I
True.
would disagree with that.
Well, you got Guild Wars 2. That's
Guild Wars 2 follows in that weird category, I think.
It does. I kind of lost interest in it after Guild Wars 1, because Guild Wars 1 gave you that slice of the world by yourself if that's what you were looking for in an MMO, and that's kind of what I like to do.
See, I found if I was going to do that, I might as well just go play like a regular Final Fantasy or Zelda or something by myself, because you were almost always alone. It didn't seem like the world was alive.
Well, I mean,
that's something that WoW had, like, just as far as fantasy goes, there's always somebody else around. You go into a city and there's all kinds of different races, and there's all kinds of different classes and different looks, and that's something that I thought while it was a good game, the original Guild Wars was missing. They tried to bring it in with Guild Wars 2, but then they went really way off in left field and tried to change how MMOs were played at a fundamental level, and that's why I think it's kind of floundered. Now, is it successful? Sure, it's still on the line. They're still producing new content. It depends on what you consider successful these days. Is it a WoW killer? Nah, never lived up to that expectation. Neither did Rift. But as long as the game has enough players to keep the server lights on and them to produce more content, the game's successful enough.
well, I mean, I know WoW still has more than 8 million, registered users.
Last call for the investors was somewhere down around 4.5 to 5.
Was it really?
Yeah, it was near the end. It's nearing the end of an expansion. The new one comes out in a couple of months. It'll probably jump to from anywhere from 8 to 11 million again come August or September when the new expansion drops.
Kind of like what happened with Final Fantasy XIV when Heaven's Word came out. What was that, Matt?
There is actually a listing of how many players there are worldwide for WoW currently.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's 2,330,338. That's worldwide.
Oh, so then it's dropped a lot.
Yep.
Yep.
And that'll happen with any kind of game like this, where, like you said, once the expansion comes out, you'll get a peek out of the players. They'll come back. They'll play for a little while. You know, the biggest part is they'll actually buy the expansion. That's what they care about.
Yep. They'll pay their $35 or $40, or they'll buy the expensive one for $100. Oh yeah, it happens every time, and I mean, Blizzard knows what they're doing.
Well, that's why Blizzard had that cycle of an expansion every 2 years, and every 6 months you had a major update.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they still
Major
live by
patch that came out. Yep, they sure do.
You got at least one new raid every 6 months. And as was said, every 2 years you got a new expansion.
Right.
Just
Yeah,
to keep the players interested.
Phoenix is following the same pattern there. But I'm going to shift this back a little bit and ask, does anybody here remember the Choose Your Own Adventure books?
I do, I still have one.
Yes.
I've got a
Yes, I do.
Sadly, I don't have mine anymore.
You know, they still make them.
I
You can
heard
still
that.
find new ones.
I heard that, Jesse. I haven't seen one, but I heard.
That was Stewart.
Or Stuart, sorry.
You know, we were sitting here talking about video games and all of this. It reminds me of a Michael Crichton quote from Timeline. He says, in other centuries, human beings wanted to be saved or improved or freed or educated. But in our century, they want to be entertained. The great fear is not of disease or death, but of boredom.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah, I can see that. Like, I can certainly see that, because I mean, I am the type of player where if I have to if I'm playing a game and I'm by myself, I will lose interest very, very quick. You know, I'm the type of MMO player where I have to have somebody to play with. You know, to have that camaraderie with people. I mean, back in my WoW days, you know, I made a lot of friends from across the world, you know, and there's 3 guys that were, at the time when I met them, they were in their teens, 16, 17 years old, and I kind of became like their WoW mom. And I'm still in contact, you know. I still talk to these 3 boys on a regular basis, you know. Their names are Dylan, Jacob, and Phil. And you know, I still talk to them on a regular basis, you know, see how they're doing, and I'm very proud of how all 3 of them have just, you know, completely made, you know, life decisions and everything to where they're at in their lives now. Like, that makes me a proud mom. You know, I became kind of their adopted mother, you know, and every birthday, you know, I'll tell them, you know, happy birthday. I'll talk to them every so often, you know, when I know they're not busy, or they'll send me a message and stuff like that. So I mean, a lot of, in the entire realm of fantasy, you know, not only do you get to immerse yourself in these worlds, you also get to build specific relationships with people.
I think that may be why fantasy also went more mainstream, was that originally you had your little comic book and you were off in the corner somewhere, or you had your deck of cards or whatever and you're off in the corner, and then slowly there's this community building up around that, and then there's this internet thing where, hey, I can talk to somebody who's interested in the same thing as I am, and they're over somewhere in Europe.
Yeah, or Asia, or wherever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think
all over the world if you're an EVE Online player.
Yeah, and I think that the biggest, you really, like, the gaming community, fantasy gaming community, was so small. Like, back during the D&D days, back during the tabletop days, before the computer, I can't say created, but before the internet became more mainstream, you had your D&D groups. You didn't know who played D&D unless you ran into them in the local, you know, gaming store. Like, you know, oh, hey, you play this, and you get to talking to people, and it becomes more of a social thing, you know. And then you're you know, people are setting up game nights, you know, and then you start building your little group from there. Well, then, like Shad just said, you had the introduction of the internet. you know, yes, we had video games, you know, Final Fantasy, when it hit the US on the regular Nintendo, you know, came out, and
I had that.
so
Yeah,
you know,
Final Fantasy 1.
you know, well, and in Final Fantasy 1 here is actually Final Fantasy 2 in Japan.
Yes, it's
You know, but you have it to where you can physically, literally watch and go through in time when things progressed for, you know, the fantasy genre. And, you know, being geeks and being nerds, and you can watch it progress from tabletop gaming to Magic the Gathering, you know, the card game, or Pokemon, or what was that other one? Yu-Gi-Oh! You know, your Yu-Gi-Oh! And then it switched into, well, hey, now, you know, when people were, you know, on AOL, you know, going into roleplay chat rooms, I still do it. I still go into onto AOL and roleplay when, you know, the bug hits me. Like I was saying earlier, you know, I have this realm that I'm creating, and I'm doing while I'm creating the realm, I'm doing a storyline version of it online to see, you know, if it's something that viable that people are going to become interested in, because I mean, it's a complete and entire world that I'm creating, and I'm doing it to see how well it'll work. Now, I know a lot of my friends that are on AOL that will come over to play, but I digress. Back to what I was just saying, you had it to where it went from D&D to the cards to when the internet came out. Yes, you had to pay for it by the minute, but then once internet went free and high speed, it just exploded everywhere. You know, and there is nothing you cannot find. There's nothing in be it real life, you know, a job, or you know, a book
Nowadays,
series.
to get a job, you practically have to be online.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and once the internet became pretty much free, quote unquote, I mean, you still had to pay your ISP, obviously, but once it became to where you could do anything on the computer, that's when it exploded. And now you're finding out that, hey, not only do we have this medium in this small group that we have, you have people on Twitch playing in different countries, having D&D nights, playing on Twitch. They're sitting there in front of their computers and they're playing D&D online. You know, you're in the US, you're in the state of Florida, and you've got somebody that's up in Washington that's part of your roleplay group. You got somebody up in Canada, somebody out in, you know, Australia, and someone over in England. That's your five, you know, group of people. And that's just kind of where you take a look at it and go, well, holy shit, you know. And it's kind of hard to sit here and go, this is my favorite thing about it, because there are so many mediums. Like with Stewart, my top 3 is books, movies, and games. That's my top 3. And, you know, like I told Matt a little bit ago when he brought up the Gun Tower series by Stephen King, I'm in the middle of reading that right now on my tablet, you know. And you have so many different authors that bring certain worlds to life. Now, then, with that being said, my question now to you guys is, who is your favorite author in the fantasy realm?
Do I have to pick one?
Yeah, if I've got to pick one, I really hate to say it, but it's probably Tolkien, because he went a lot of it, you know, he was the first one. He did his own languages. He did, you know, he took a lot of the myths that, you know, people have had over the years, especially European myths, like with the elves and dwarves and all that stuff, and kind of brought it into one area.
Very true. Very true.
In the process, he wrote his own mythology.
Yeah.
And technically his own Bible if you've read the Silmarillion.
Yes.
Right, right.
I mean, the Elven language is a complete language.
Mm-hmm. And it is one that I was watching a documentary on when they were filming Lord of the Rings that they actually had to learn to speak this language. And Liv Tyler, still to this day, can still speak it.
I wonder when Rosetta Stone is going to come out with a program for it.
When they get the Klingon one done.
When Klingonese, yeah. I mean,
Yep.
Klingonese has its own dictionary, and it has had for, what, 20-some years?
Yeah. Yeah. So, Shaddris, if you had to pick an author, you know, of the fantasy genre, who would it be?
Yeah, this is difficult.
Well, I never said it was easy.
Yeah, well, it's because I have so many different venues that I pay attention to. Anime, there's the Slayers, there's Orphan. Really, we could go back to Lotus Wars.
Yeah.
Actually, you know, I'll throw a good one out here. Gary Gygax.
Excellent. Actually, just to go on those, the original novels that he put out for D&D in the late 70s and early 80s, I'm actually reading them currently.
One thing I will say, though, is he got his inspiration from Tolkien.
Yes,
Yes.
he did, and he admits it.
Well, then again, Tolkien got his inspiration from several sources, too, so...
True. Jesse, if you had to pick your favorite fantasy author, who would it be?
Truth be told, the only one I've really read anything of, and it's not so much fantasy, it's more like suspense, like espionage novels, would be Nelson DeMille. Truth be told, I've never actually read a like actual fantasy book.
Okay. Stuart, what's yours? Or do I even need to ask?
Actually, I think you'd be surprised.
Weiss and Hickman?
No, actually, I you know, believe it or not, that's what got me started. And they're fun reads, you know, just like R.A. Salvatore, you know, his books are amazing, and he's written video games, and they're amazing. But for me, if I had to pick one, it would be Terry Goodkind, the Sword of Truth series, because there's so much great life lessons in those that you can actually change your life.
Yeah, true. Rachel, what's yours?
I can't pick one. I honestly can't.
Matt? Or is he still AFK?
I think he's still AFK.
Now, that being said, if you're going to include fantasy in that, or not fantasy, but sci-fi in the fantasy genre, jeez, I'm trying to think of the guy's name. The guy that wrote the Thrawn trilogies.
Thrawn trilogies? Let me see. Hold on.
Yeah, just Timothy Zahn.
Okay. Well, and then if okay, so then that being said, if we're going to, you know, kind of toss sci-fi into this whole fantasy genre,
Roddenberry.
yeah, Roddenberry. Now, Chris, there's one that you and I talk about, because on Final Fantasy, you have your tunes named.
Yes, I do.
And Frank Herbert.
Yes, Frank Herbert, again, another amazing author. There's just so many. I mean, I could probably list off 20 of them and go, oh my god, they're all good. I'll read anything they put out.
Right.
And just go and enjoy it. But to pick just one, it's hard, and, you know, it could depend on my mood and what type of fantasy I want to read. Do I want to read sci-fi? Do I want to read high fantasy? Do I want to read medieval fantasy that's, you know, got no magic or anything like that, or demons. It's just like, you know, back in a period of back in the Dark Ages.
Right.
There's so many, and it depends what I'm reading and what I'm in the mood to read.
The first book series that I actually read, like actually sat down and read, and again, this is all because of Stewart, but it happened years after, you know, after I got involved, because I got involved in role playing, but I didn't get involved with actually reading books, reading the fantasy books, but is the Dragonlance series. I started with the first 2 trilogies, and like those were my treasures. If I moved anywhere, I always made sure those 6 books were packed up and ready to go. You know.
I think they were all Weiss and Hickman, weren't they?
What's that?
They were all Weiss and Hickman novels.
I think so.
Yeah, they were
I know the first story
Chronicles.
was.
Yep.
You know, and I remember absolutely falling in love with Tanis Half-Elven. And I remember, like, the first book that ever, and guys, if you have not read the series, this is going to be a major spoiler, so spoiler alert, the first book, or first scene in a book that absolutely had me in tears was when, not when the little halfling died, but the dwarf. Stuart, you're gonna know who I'm talking about.
Played Fireforge.
Yes.
When he died in the heart attack.
When he died in in the little Tasselhoff, or whatever the fuck his name is.
Tasselhoff Burfoot.
Yes. And it's his reaction to Flint dying, because throughout this series you're watching how their relationship develops. Like, Flint absolutely hated Tasselhoff, you know, and just because he's a Kender, you know, Kenders are Kenders. You just want to know what a Kender is? The easiest thing that I can kind of...
They're a hobbit that steals anything that isn't nailed down.
Yes, that's
With the
exactly...
attention span of a 2-year-old.
Exactly.
2-year-olds with longer extension spans.
Exactly, you know, but it's the scene when Flint dies, it is Tasselhoff's reaction to where, you know, it's just like that right there. That is the first scene ever in a book series. Even still to this day, even when I read it, I still break down in tears at that part of the book, because I mean, it's just so heart-wrenching, you know.
Now,
Go ahead.
In that series, the part that gets me, and I still to this day remember it like it was yesterday that I read it the first time, is when Kitty Yara runs Sturm through with the lance.
Yep, I remember that one.
Her ex-husband, I think it is. I don't know if they were actually married, but they were definitely lovers.
Yeah, I think they were lovers, never married.
Sturm was such a tormented guy to begin with.
So is Cameron, though. I mean, Cameron was torn between, you know, protecting his brother and then wanting to be with Tika.
And then realizing he had to destroy his brother.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was way later in the series.
True, but
yeah.
that was a big thing too. I remember reading it the first time, and when Saruman realizes that, you know, that Raceland has to be stopped.
Now, speaking of Raceland, the scene, the situation with Raceland that stands out more so in my mind than anything is in one of his books. I don't remember which one it is, but in one of his books, I mean, you're going through and you're reading these series and you're seeing this character who is an absolute asshole. I mean, this guy is somebody that you would love to dunk in a vat of hot oil, hot bubbling, burning oil, you know, just because you hate him that much. But then when he comes across Bupu and you start seeing that humane side of him, like, and you know, you go through, because she is absolutely in love with him. They're called gnomes, right? I think.
What's that?
Bupu, like, are they gnomes? I don't remember. It's been so long since I've read it. But anyways, the little character Bupu that starts following him around, she's enamored with Raceland, and you sit and watch how his humanity starts slowly coming back to the surface as he interacts with this character, because her race and others like her, they're so childlike in how they are. I mean, and that's even the adult ones. They're like they're little toddlers.
She was a gully dwarf.
Gully dwarf, that, yeah. But you start to watch his humanity come out with her being around. And I remember his reaction, I do believe, when she died. And it was, you actually got to see that human side of Raceland for the first time. Not Raceland the mage, not Raceland the brother, it was Raceland the man, the human. You actually got to see how that developed with him. And that's, I think, a lot of why I loved those books so much, because to me, those are immersive books. And you get so attached to characters when you read certain books, especially if it's a series, and everything else. Like my husband right now, he's writing a book series. He's already been published once, but because he had no contact with the publisher for the last 5 years, the rights to the book reverted back to him. So he's going through and rewriting and upgrading and updating some of his first book. And he's already got, the all 3 books, the first trilogy done, and he's working on the second trilogy as well. I have, even with him, reading his work, I have my favorite characters out of his series. He went through it, he also created an entire world, an entire realm. And I have my favorite characters out of his book series. And it's just, you get these characters when you're reading a book, especially when it's a series, that you just latch onto. Like is it the Tamoli series? No. What's it called? It's by the same author it's by David Eddings, and it's kind of on the same vein as the Belgariad, which I will say is my husband's absolute favorite book series. But it's the one that he did that had Elena, like the Queen Elena, locked in this crystal, this box, because she got poisoned. And you had, I think it was like the Ruby Knight or the Diamond Throne. What is that book series called? Let me see here.
Oh, there's also the Xanth series. I mean, that series is huge too.
Yeah. The Elenium series by David Eddings. It's got the Diamond Throne. Take a look here. I had to Google it just so you guys are aware. The Diamond Throne, the Ruby Knight, and the Sapphire Rose. That is the Elenium series. Diamond Throne is book 1 of it. And then you've also, by David Eddings, got the Tamoli series. I've read both of those. In that series, I have to honestly say my absolute favorite character is Sparhawk and Elena's daughter. Her name she's a goddess reborn, pretty much, and her name is Flute. And it's so funny to watch her go around because she's this little girl and she commands the attention of all the adults, and just kind of go through and watch these relationships with people unfold, with the Dragonlance series, with the as Matt said earlier, the Gunslinger series. You get favorite characters, and I love watching the dynamics of sitting here watching characters develop and watching them go from how they were in book 1, page 1, into, you know, 3 books later, if it's a trilogy, and how they are in book 3 on the very last page. That growth that they go through. I love seeing that, and I think that's one of the reasons why the Millennium and the Dragonland series are 2 of my absolute favorite series as far as book series goes.
The question that you asked earlier about the sci-fi genre, I'm gonna throw it out there. My favorite was Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. What a
Yes.
great one.
Absolutely. I actually have that movie down here somewhere that I'm gonna be tossing into PSP at one point in time to watch.
Which version? The newer one or the original British one?
The newer one. I don't have the original British one.
The original British one is light years ahead of the American one.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, you know, it's like everybody knows, you know, anybody who absolutely like knows me like down to the bone knows what my favorite fandom is. I'm not quiet about it or anything like that. I am an avid, hardcore, die-hard Doctor Who fan. I mean...
Now, have you read the books?
No, I have not read the books. I'm having to very slowly get my collection of Doctor Who stuff up. I'm actually more worried about first getting my Doctor Who tattoo that I'm going to be getting, which is all 4 of my children's names in Gallifreyan, and it's going on my left inner forearm, which is actually one of my Christmas presents from last year. Is my husband, my brother, and my sister-in-law are all going to pitch in for me to get that tattoo. But it just... Yes, we are talking favorite authors, Matt.
Okay, just kidding.
So, but, I mean, yeah, it just, you go through and it is very, very hard to pick a favorite author, you know, if you had to sit down with so many out there. You know, it really is. It's hard to sit down and pick one because, again, you know, you have Mercedes Lackey, you have, oh God, what was her name? There was another one, I don't remember what her name is.
Anne Rice.
Anne Rice, she's another one. Now, on that vein of fantasy, if I had to sit here and pick out that vein of fantasy, it's Anne Rice and Stephen King, respectively. Like, I love them both. They're both my favorite authors, like, of all time. I have read almost everything of both authors. I would have to say, as far as Anne Rice goes, and we're going to get a little smut-tastic here, I loved her Sleeping Beauty trilogy when she wrote under her pseudonym of A.R. Roclure. Her take on the Sleeping Beauty trilogy, or the Sleeping Beauty story, and then adding in the, for lack of a better way of explaining it, the 50 Shades of Grey part of it.
She goes way beyond 50 Shades
Well,
of Grey.
yeah, she does go way beyond 50 Shades of Grey, but it's giving people an idea of what the book entails, you know. Does she go beyond it? Oh, absolutely. You know, the very first scene of the book trilogy is a prince coming to where, you know, Aurora is, where she's lying asleep, and he rapes her, and she wakes up. I mean, that's the very first scene. You know, and it's, if anybody that ever listens to this podcast, I will tell you right now, if you go read that book series, buckle up, because shit gets exotic, and it gets just, yeah.
It is not for the faint of heart.
No, it's not for the faint of heart. I mean, I will fully admit, I've read the entire trilogy of the 50 Shades of Grey, only because you can't really have an opinion on something unless you've either read it or watched it or heard it. And I went through and read all 3 books, The first book of the 50 Shades of Grey it is exactly so extremely smut-tastic, but it becomes more of a story during books 2 and 3. Now apparently she's coming out with a 4th book that's you know, the book series from Christian's side of things, but that's that's entirely a different podcast if we were to even go into that, which I don't think we will. But yeah, I mean, just if anybody ever decides to read that trilogy by Anne Rice, buckle up, because things get sexual, and I mean like hardcore. People want to sit here and compare 50 Shades of Grey and the Sleeping Beauty trilogy. There's no comparison at all. 50 Shades of Grey is that story that doesn't even...
It's the mainstream BDSM story. That's all it is.
Exactly. But with Anne Rice, she gets into it so much deeper.
Here's a better way to put it.
Pun not intended.
50 Shades of Grey is PG. The Anne Rice trilogy, the Sleeping Beauty one, that's full-blown NX-17.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. There's no way around that one. Like, they gave 50 Shades of Grey an R rating. If they were to do Anne Rice's Sleeping Beauty trilogy, it would most definitely get the NC-17 rating that they were looking for, but I don't think they'd be able to do it without actually turning it into an actual porn. So, that's just my opinion.
Then you've got, you know, you guys brought up horror fantasy, like with or the horror fantasy genre with like the Dark Towers and other Stephen King stuff. There's only one book I've ever read in that whole genre that ever really gave me chills, and to this day it's still the original Bram Stoker's Dracula. That book is creepy as shit.
See, I haven't actually read that. That's like on my bucket list.
It's creepy. Like,
It really is.
It really is creepy. It's, wow. And well written. It's, you know, there are some language barriers because, you know, it's written in a different time,
Right.
much like Shakespeare, but not quite as bad as Shakespeare, but there is definitely some language things you would have to overcome. But if you get the language references, oh my god, it's creepy.
That's on my bucket list to read, actually. Bram Stoker's Dracula, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and continuing on with the horror side of it, William Peter Blatty's book of The Exorcist.
Okay, I'm going to save you here. Do not read Frankenstein.
Really?
No, I have to agree. Frankenstein was not very good.
I wanted to
disagree.
slap the shit out of that whiny little bitch.
I have to agree. I didn't care for it at all.
I trudged through it. I got halfway through and I put it down, and finally, I think a month later, I said, you know, I have to finish this just because.
Just to say you finished it.
Yeah, and I have a library. I have my own library, and I keep books in my library for other people. So when I have people come over, I'll eventually get talking about some book or movie, and I'll say, hey, you want to read the book? I've got it, and I give it away. And when I got finished with Frankenstein, I threw it in the trash. It will never be in my library.
And I mean, and as we all know, you know, we're sitting here at, you know, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people. We're all going to have 7 different opinions on a book series, you know, or a specific book. I want to read it. I mean, I'm taking what you guys say into consideration. I want to read it just to say that I've read it.
Well, it's a classic, and you need to at least try to. But yeah,
I do
not a
recommend
fan.
Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Excellent book.
That's
Yes.
another one that's on my bucket list to read.
That's another language barrier book, though.
Yeah, it's written in the same time frame, so you're gonna have to get past the language. But
Well,
again, if you can read Shakespeare and understand it, you will have 0 issues.
yeah, and I can. So, I mean, when I was in college, my minor in college was English Lit. So, I mean, to me, reading books like that, language barriers don't bother me at all. You know, I wrote one of my I wrote one of my major papers that I had to write in college about William Shakespeare, in fact. Um, so, the language for me has not been, a huge problem for me understanding it, because William Shakespeare is one of my favorite authors of all time. He's a classic writer. I think the one that gives me the most problems as far as like a language barrier goes is probably the Odyssey and the Iliad. Is the two that
Nobody can sit here and say that they understood every single fucking word.
It's the same with Beowulf and Grendel.
Yeah.
I mean, even the translation isn't great.
Same with
Right.
Dante's Inferno.
Yeah, Dante's Inferno, again, the same problem. But again, those are classics, and they're still really great reads.
Right.
Yeah. I think by far it's a tie between Butcher and Stephen King, but what I really love about Stephen King's Dark Tower series, or even The Stand, if we're going to go with the classics, he puts you in the position of the character before he lets loose his horror.
Yep.
And
Now, if you want to go, what's my favorite book by any specific author, I am honestly going to go with The Stand, hands down. All-time favorite book, ever. I actually, when I was pregnant with my oldest son, my first husband and I, the Stand was turned into a TV series, and we watched it. And I remember being pregnant with my son and going to the library, and I had that book checked out for 3 months. Because I'm not a fast reader. I'm the type of reader where I want to go through and read it and try to understand, like every word that is written, how the situation is. I allow my mind to latch on to a scene and build itself in my mind and my imagination. If we had to go with, favorite book, The Stand, hands down. I mean, I sat while I was pregnant in my recliner for 3 months, because I was also high-risk pregnancy, and read that book. And it did actually take me 3 months to do it. Now, today, would it take me that long? No. But at the same time, again, it goes with that's another book where you sit here and you go through and you find your favorite characters. You sit here and you watch certain characters like Harold Lauder. You watch him go from this pimply-faced, geeky guy who is absolutely in love, with what's her name? She's played by Molly Ringwald, though. I know
who you're talking about.
Yeah, she's the one that gets involved with Stu Redman. Fran. He's absolutely.
Her father was played by Kelso in the TV show.
Yeah. So you see him as this, this kid who's absolutely in love with Fran, and then you watch the dynamic, of him trying to be the alpha male in this group when they meet up with Stu Redman and the older guy with the dog. But you watch this dynamic of him trying to, go from timid, geeky, and we're not talking like the cool geeky part, but like the whole pimply-faced teenager, the one that kind of creeps you out a little bit, guy, to trying to be the alpha male. And then once they got to Colorado, to Boulder, you see it to where the walking dude is what they call him, Randall Flagg. You see the dynamic of how Flagg gets into his head, especially when, what's her name, Naomi?
Yep, the chick that was trying to stay close to Larry.
Yeah, Naomi. When it comes around, and Randall Flagg has a lock on both of those. She has to remain a virgin, but Randall Flagg puts these two together, and he does it with Naomi and tells her, do this with Harold, keep him where we want him to be. This is where I want you to do this. Don't give your virtue up to him, but satisfy him in ways that, that'll keep him on the track of where we want him to go. And, that's when they do the whole blowing up, of the house and everything, and then they leave, and you sit, and it's as he's laying there, again, spoiler alert if you've never read the book or seen the movie, it's when he's laying there after, his motorcycle has crashed and his body is just all broken and everything, and Naomi's sitting there, she's looking down at him, and she's like, I gotta go, I'm not staying here. And he writes, I'm sorry. And then, Stu, Larry, and the old guy find his body, on the trek to them going to Vegas. And, they see the note where it says, I'm sorry for what he did. And that's another book where you watch these characters develop and grow into their own, and then ultimately you see what their, quote unquote demise is going to be. So,
and how long is that book?
Depends on which version you get.
Yeah.
Okay, what, the normal one that you go and buy in the store? I know it's large.
Yeah, it's huge.
The uncut version is about 800 pages soft cover, so that would make it about, I'd say, 1,200 pages hardcover.
So realistic. Go ahead.
Well, we're sitting here lamenting over books that we love and movies and games. So that would be a good question to the group is, so what fantasy, either book, movie, whatever, what have you, what has made the biggest impact on your life?
Star Wars.
Now, when you say Star Wars, is it because of the entertainment value, or is it maybe the Jedi Creed?
The whole thing. Like, good versus evil, the Jedi versus the Sith, which is not as black and white as everyone thinks it is. The Sith are not that different from the Jedi.
No, not at all. I'm going to say my age here. I actually have seen every Star Wars movie first showing in the theater.
So have I. So...
Yeah, me, Stewart, and Kurtz are the oldest three here, just so you guys are aware. We're all in our 40s.
All right, Chris. So, Star Wars. Who else?
For me, it would honestly have to be, I mean, like I said, it would have to be the Dragonlance books for me. Because, I mean, when we were teenagers and you mentioning just a character's name, kind of piqued my interest. And then, a couple years later when I actually got into actually reading it, that was the hook for me. That is ultimately the book series that changed and had the biggest impact on my life, was, the Dragonlance series. Because if it hadn't have been for you and that series, I never would have gotten to where I'm at today. On as far as like reading the books and seeing the movies and the video games and stuff like that. I never would have been there had it not for you mentioning one character's name in one book. So yeah, for me it would be the Dragonlance series.
Oh, you're welcome. I do take cash, check, or credit.
So
or Samsung Pay or Apple Pay.
Hey, what about PayPal?
No, they take a percentage.
Oh, do they? Okay.
So,
Bitcoin.
Okay,
How old are we going back here?
As far back as you want to go, it doesn't matter.
Okay. Then I would have to say, honestly, the Forgotten Realms Avatar series.
Excellent series, actually.
That was actually one of the fantasy genres that really stuck with me in terms of, like, I know it's a branch off of D&D and whatnot, but and still set in the same world and whatnot, but like that book series was really well written by the various authors that contributed to it. Like, you can tell each one took care of the characters, where characters needed to die or be punished, or terrible things happened to them. Just overall, the books were good. I think my only real hatred for that series would be the final book, where it was told from the perspective of what's his name's kind of chosen.
I don't think I ever read that series. I don't know.
It's been a long time. It's sitting on my bookshelf though.
It was like literally the last book where they're trying Mystra and Kellenborg.
Ah, Mystra, the goddess of magic in the land of Faerun.
Oh, Mystra, yes.
When they put her and Kellenborg on trial for not doing their duties properly.
Yeah, that's just before she died.
After, actually.
Or just after she died, sorry.
And somebody new took her place.
Yes.
Huh. I have no idea.
She's back now, but yeah.
It's like a new personality behind Mystra in this after the Avatar series.
I don't think I've read that one. Now, when I played D&D, Forgotten Realms is the absolute realm that I played in. We didn't get involved in the Dragonlance realms or anything like that. Or even, is it Grey Wolf or Grey Hawk?
Grey Hawk. That
Grey
is the
Hawk,
original.
okay.
That is the original realm.
Yeah.
The entire thing was written by Gary Gygax.
Yep.
And while I like the realms, if I had to choose between the two, I found Greyhawk much more interesting.
It was a lot more diverse.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It is very, very diverse compared to the new one, or the newer one, I suppose now.
Shaddris, what is your answer? Like, what book changed or stayed with you throughout your life?
Oddly enough, I'm going to have to say AD&D 2.0.
Advanced Second Edition, Player's Handbook, yeah.
And more specifically, what was happening was I was at one of the Boy Scout retreats, and some of the older boys were playing this game. It's like, okay, that looks interesting. So I got, learned about it, read the books, got involved, and, I'm here now playing Pathfinder. Actually sitting here kind of running ideas through my head about how am I going to get this story together for the people that I'm going to have playing probably September, October timeframe.
Rachel, what about you?
Honestly, for me, what got my start, at least movie-wise and book-wise, would actually have to be Star Wars also. For me, it was when I was young and living with my grandparents. My grandpa had this old movie collection, and one of them was the original Star Wars trilogy, the original ones on VHS before the remaster, and watching that got really my interest. Video game wise, it was actually when my grandpa had finally picked up a PlayStation, the original PlayStation, and truthfully, it was a Xena video game that really got me into wanting to play video games.
I remember that game too.
Yeah, just watching the original Star Wars movie especially. Before I even saw that, what really got me into it was my grandpa, when he first got a computer too, he was showing me clips on, I forget this program, but one of them was the scene when they're escaping from the Death Star, or not the Death Star, but when they're escaping with Sis Leia after just breaking her out, and Obi-Wan Kenobi gets killed. That was the first clip I watched of Star Wars, and just seeing it, I was like, I gotta see this movie. And my grandpa pulls out the trilogy a couple months later, and I'm like, yes, I finally get to see it. And just from then on, it's been pretty much anything fantasy, and especially Star Wars.
I remember for me, for Star Wars, the original trailer. Remember watching it on TV, and it shows Luke when he's just starting to learn about the Force and the Millennium Falcon. The first time I ever heard a lightsaber ignite. That noise it makes, and still to this day they make, it just I can't get over it. It just sends chills up my spine.
You know what does that to me? The Transformers. No.
What's that?
The Transformers. Like, you know the sound that they make when they transform? When the movie came out, I was like, okay, are they going to be able to do it? And when they did it, like, I got giggly like a little schoolgirl.
Mine was Prime's voice when he first talked.
Yep. Same actor, by the way.
Yes, it is. And
We have studied your language using the World Wide Web.
I'm back.
Is that everybody? Did we go through everybody for their favorite book? Or because I got another question that is a good one.
Yeah, I think we did.
All right, here's one for you guys. Which TV show or movie would you say is the best adaptation of a book?
The very first Harry Potter movie and book.
Okay.
I tell people all the time, if you watch the first Harry Potter movie, you don't need to read the book. There's almost nothing left out of it.
Okay.
My husband would actually disagree with you with that. Because I guess there's a lot of dynamic that they left out of the movie that's in the book.
You're always going to miss the inner monologue, the little bit there, here and there. But for the most part, they did a good job portraying it. There's a couple of small things like him being presented a photo of his family from Hagrid when he gets on the train at the very end of the book. But realistically, it's pretty spot on. Anyway, that's my answer.
Chad?
Honestly, I can't really think of any book that converted exactly over.
Well, I'm as close as what was the best movie or TV adaptation of a book?
I would have to say.
Well, go ahead, Salem.
I'm trying to think here, honestly.
My wife just yelled up the stairs. She heard me, and she says The Princess Bride. She's right. It is a really good one.
I have to say The Strain.
Actually, yeah. The TV show or the movie?
I didn't know that there was a movie for it, because I'm not talking about the Andromeda Strain. I'm talking about that one written by Guillermo del Toro.
Oh, okay.
But if it wasn't that, then I would have to say that, oh Christ.
All right, let's flip this around. What was the worst? And no one, take your time.
I was just about to say, I can't think of a good one, but I can think of one I feel is horrible. Which,
I've got it. Okay.
Honestly, for me, I think that that TV show Legend of the Seeker, which was supposed to be based on the Sword of Truth novels,
God.
I did not like that whatsoever.
They veered so far off the books.
Worst? To this day, I still say Fellowship of the Ring.
For me, go ahead.
There was way
Sorry.
too much missing. Like Aragorn doesn't when they leave to go destroy the ring, he's got this new sword. He didn't have it. He doesn't get it till the third movie. There's Tom Bombadil's not in it. The trolls aren't in it. I mean, I can go on and on. There's just huge pieces of the book missing.
The
only issue they had with that one was they needed to make, one movie, if they put everything into it, would be like, 6 hours?
True, but there's other things they could have cut out to make it more authentic.
Well, I'm going to answer both questions. For me, the best adaptation of book to TV series or movie was The Stand. I don't think they could have gotten any better.
Yes, they could have.
I agree. It wasn't. I didn't like the adaptation at all.
Well, I mean, and mind you, this is like, you know, all of our opinions. To me, that was the best one. Now, the worst one, this is actually probably going to surprise you guys. The worst adaptation of book to film, Queen of the Damned by Anne Rice.
I actually 100% agree with
They left out so much, and it was actually, if anybody's read any of Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles, you would know that the movie Queen of the Damned is actually the Vampire Lestat, the book.
Yep.
And of when, and it's actually the end of the book, because it doesn't go through Lestat's life. It doesn't go through to show you how Lestat became a vampire. It doesn't go through to show that he was a spoiled little rich boy from France. You know, it doesn't do any of that. But then when you introduce Akasha, you're also introducing the twins, the red-haired twins, Makira and Maharet. Well, they only introduced one of them, and it didn't go into in what gives Queen of the Damned such understanding. Like, you finally understand where all this started and why Akasha is so hated, because you have to go back and it tells the story of Akasha and Keel, Kamari, I think is his name, and the red-haired twins. Like, you know, the two, they're witches, and Akasha is this you know, Egyptian queen, and everything else. It doesn't go into any of that. And, like, how I got turned on to Anne Rice was when the Interview with the Vampire came out. After seeing the movie and then reading the book, trust me, the book is so much better. But that's what turned me on to Anne Rice and her Vampire Chronicles, was seeing Interview with the Vampire. After I had read the first 5 books that she wrote, and heard that they were actually coming out with Queen of the Damned as a movie, I waited 6 years for this movie to come out, because they kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And then when it finally came out in theaters, I actually went by myself to go see this movie, and I almost got up and walked out in the middle of the movie. And I never do that. And it was, for the characters that they had in the Queen of the Damned movie, it was good. For a movie as a movie's sake, it was good. For a movie based on a book, worst I've ever seen. Like, ever, hands down, as far as, you know, any of that goes. Because
Hellraiser's 5 through the rest.
I forgot to give my best adaptation too. 1984 Dune.
Great movie.
Yes, very good. Here's my worst. The Equestrian Girls by My Little Pony. No, I would agree with Rachel. Just because that's my #1 go-to book series. Yeah, The Seeker was so horrible.
And it's really funny because I actually just started watching Legends of the Seeker on Hulu, because my husband's been after me for a couple of years to watch this. Now, he also, he's with him doing that. We were actually just talking about it the other day. He says that the one thing that kind of irks him about the TV show is the fact of they condensed 1/3 of, like, the entire series of Richard's time with Denna into one series. He goes, and you don't really get to see Richard's growth in the TV show, like he grew and everything when in that 1/3 of the book, like he did when he was with Denna.
Oh, absolutely. But like the other guys on here said, they deviated so much from the book series. They slit their own throats because they couldn't go any further. I mean, you couldn't follow the books.
Yeah, exactly.
I will point out, I remember at the very beginning of that series, the Book of Counted Shadows was burned, and the response was, well, I guess we don't have a book to guide us.
Right?
I wonder if they were honestly calling themselves out at that moment.
They jumped the shark right at the beginning.
They could have been.
I posted a link in the chat if anybody is interested in more suspense and espionage type books. The author Nelson DeMille, his character of John Corey in like the soon-to-be 7 books that he's in. Keep in mind, I'm not a person who's really big into reading books. I usually get bored and then go find something else to do. I've never been so gripped by his books in my life. I remember specifically at one point in my life I read 4 of them back to back.
Oddly enough, thinking about it, one of the other books that really made a difference. Ever heard of a book called Down Below Station by, what is it? It's Shaddris, I think is the name.
User was moved to your channel.
Yes.
Before anybody answers, we do have a new person, actually a new guest joining us. Her name is Becca. Becca and I have been friends for 10 years or so, something like that. And yes, dear, you probably have to find your push to talk button. She's asking me a question on Facebook.
We figured.
I haven't heard of that book. What's it about?
Basically, it's science fiction with a little bit of political espionage where one guy is trying to take over the station and aids what's considered, I guess, the enemy at the time in doing so, and the main group gets exiled down to the planet below. And then they proceed to try to take it back. It's basically a fight between Earth and the outer colonies, and the merchants that are running in between are trying to stay independent.
Hang on a second, guys. Okay, so we were talking about what, the worst adaptation?
Yeah,
Best and worst.
Best
Yeah.
and worst?
Yep.
Yeah, I already gave my 2. There was one that that just popped up for me. I haven't seen it, but I've heard that it's actually a really good show. And who actually did it surprises me. MTV's the Shannara Chronicles. Has anybody seen those yet? Seen that show yet?
But I won't dignify MTV with anything ever since Jersey Shore.
Yeah.
Amen, brother.
I watched the first this season.
Get out.
Okay,
Jersey
I
Shore?
haven't seen that one, so oddly enough, it reminds me of the earlier Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe series that was a decent adaptation of the book, but still can't hold a candle.
By the way, y'all knew that C.A. Lewis and Tolkien used to meet, I think once a week at least, and discuss the books that they were writing?
Did you also know that Christopher Lee actually helped Tolkien write some of his book? Like, that's why he wanted to play, that's why he wanted to be in the movie Lord of the Rings so bad. You know, the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, is because he was actually there when Tolkien wrote those.
That's
Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, they used to belong to a writing group that would meet, and they would, you know, just like we're doing now, discuss things that were going on. And it's really funny. Tolkien told C.A. Lewis that he couldn't write a book that had a mixture of fantasy characters together. You couldn't mix Greek and Roman mythology characters together, and he did anyway.
Well, then that would bring up the question, why couldn't you? Because back during the Greek and Roman times, the gods were interchangeable.
Sort of. That's. Remember, they had they were the same, supposed to be the same gods, but they all had different names.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, honestly, look at the Final Fantasy series. I mean, how much did they mix basically the high fantasy swords and sorcery with the science fantasy of cruising around in Ragnarok?
A lot.
Can you guys hear me?
Uh-huh. Hi, sissy.
Hi. Sorry about that. Took me a minute.
That's okay. Guys, this is one of my best friends as well. Her name is Rebecca, and she is also like me and Jesse. She and I met on AOL Roleplay a lot of years ago.
And then she lived with me, and then she left me and moved to Iowa.
Well, no, I lived with you, and then I left to move to Oregon, and then I moved to Kansas, and then I moved to Iowa. So.
Either way, you still left me.
I'm sorry.
Rude.
And I still have your crap in my garage after 10 years.
I know. I need to be able to take a vacation and come out there to come and get it. But
anyway, hi guys.
Hello.
So, Miss Becca, now that you are on, to kind of bring you up to speed with everything, we've talked about a lot in like the last hour and 45 minutes.
Most of it being porn.
Why doesn't that surprise me?
Well, we were talking about, let's see, Game of Thrones.
Porn.
The internet is for porn.
We didn't get to True Blood, though.
We did skip True Blood. We also skipped The Walking Dead, too, because I was going to say...
Don't you have those as episodes, though?
What, True Blood?
Walking Dead.
I am still half season behind on season 6.
Yeah, me too.
No, I mean, like, aren't you having an episode of podcast?
We did. That was last week's, dear. The zombie apocalypse.
Oh yeah, fuck me running, you're right. Leave me alone, it's been a long week.
A little less wacky tobacky for you.
Hey, fuck you, Chris, it's been a long week. My brother just moved in.
Sorry about that, guys. So, sis,
Don't die.
question is, the question of the day, pretty much, or of the episode is, what is your favorite fantasy medium? Like books, movies, TV shows, games?
And which one had the biggest impact on your life?
Yes.
Honestly, I'd have to say Piers Anthony when I was growing up.
Sam.
And I also like Terry Brooks as I got a little bit older. In my teenage years, you know, the Swords of Shannara, all of that. I've read all of those.
Rachel, don't you have the Piers Anthony books? Is my fiance even alive?
Huh?
Rachel? Did somebody kill my fiance? Because if they did, I'll offer a reward.
I told her to the gypsies.
You did me a favor.
Yeah,
No, honey, you're not.
Your mic's out for some reason.
I don't watch a lot of shows. I think the last show I actually watched was The White Queen.
I heard that was really good.
Dude, it was
How about now?
fantastic.
There you go.
Heard you that time.
As I was trying to say, yes, I have actually a few Piers Anthony's books.
friends of mine just met him at or not Anthony, they met Terry Brooks down at Comic-Con in Denver.
Nice.
And they got a picture with Stan Lee.
Yeah, and he's not doing Comic-Cons anymore, he said. He just recently did his last one.
Yep, he's doing Denver this weekend, and I think he's got one more out east, and then he's done.
He's still doing his personal, Stanley Comic-Con thing that he does, his own convention for Marvel and whatnot.
Well, the man is 4 days older than Jesus. He needs to take a break sometime.
He's 93.
He's 93?
Everyone form a protective circle around him.
No shit, right?
Yeah, the wind blows the wrong way, he's dead.
2016 has not been kind to many of our favorites.
No, it has not.
Yeah, we lose all these great artists, but we still got Kanye West and the Kardashians. What the fuck?
I'll give all of them up.
We still got Bieber, too.
And you know,
I thought we were trying to give him back to Canadians.
What was that?
Bieber's from your neck of the woods, geographically speaking.
Yeah, the last time he landed in Canada, he was immediately arrested, put back in a plane, and sent back to Miami.
So a Canadian citizen was arrested and sent somewhere else?
He was deported because he was wanted in Miami.
Oh, okay. Well, good.
And he fell off the stage at his recent concert, so there is some hope that he'll break his neck.
Yeah, hopefully. Right? We don't want him anymore. He's American now.
We don't want him.
You can take that little shit back. We got enough problems, thank you.
Yeah.
It's bad enough you guys, pawned him off on us. Now you get to take him back.
Yep. Okay, so and to kind of bring you a little bit more up to speed, what would you say is your favorite book adaptation, to movie or TV, and what do you think is the worst one in your opinion?
Again, I have to abstain from that because I don't watch much TV, guys. I really don't.
The Brothers Grimm was a...
Yeah, that was pretty terrible.
I hated that movie.
Has anybody been watching Beowulf in the Shieldlands?
Didn't even know it was on TV.
It's on. First season ended a couple months ago, but if you're a Beowulf fan or you would like to actually see it, it's a very, very good adaptation.
Well, is that on BBC though?
No, it's what's it on? It was on regular TV. It wasn't BBC.
Well, Canada's regular TV and the US's regular TV are completely different.
I just like the fact that everyone thinks that the really cool shows come on BBC.
The really cool shows do come on the BBC.
Not true.
Like a good chunk of American shows are actually remakes of British shows. Like House of Cards was actually a British show first.
There was another one that there was actually two that were from...
least favorite adaptation, but I don't think she'd be able to answer that if she doesn't watch a lot of TV or movies.
Yeah, that's what she was saying, is she couldn't answer it because she doesn't watch a lot of TV or movies.
ITV.
Oh, I watch movies, I just don't watch TV.
That's why I've been... Go ahead.
It can be a movie, not necessarily a TV show.
Yeah, because my worst adaptation was the Queen of the Damned movie.
Okay, yeah, I have to agree with that one. That one was pretty crappy.
That one pissed me off.
Nightbreed pissed me off by, Clive Barker.
Hellraiser? What about it?
No, his other book, Nightbreed, or Cabal, rather, than they called it Nightbreed when they released it.
Mm-hmm.
That was a really bad adaptation of that book.
I have to agree with you on that one.
Complete horror fantasy, but still fantasy. Really bad adaptation. Great writing for the book, absolute crap for the movie.
Okay.
There's been a lot of Stephen King movies that have been crap.
Yeah, but some of those movies have been better than the books.
Maximum Overdrive has been crap. Even though it was written, it was, you know, a short story.
That Dreamcatcher movie was better than the book.
You think so? Really?
The book
I
wasn't
do,
very
actually.
good. I thought the book was crap.
I liked Stephen King's It better in movie form than I did book form.
Shut your dirty whore mouth, Jesse.
I'm
get
sorry,
told
I
that all
have
the
to
time.
agree with Jesse on that.
Yeah, that is definitely, that's, yeah, don't say such things. That's blasphemy.
No. There's a reason why I say that, and Jesse's
I'm
doing
a huge
it.
Tim Curry fan, and plus I know Salem really hates clowns.
Tim Curry, I will admit, was very good. That was the only good thing about the entire movie.
Yeah, I have to agree. Even the book, I really didn't care for. Just to go through like 900 pages just to find out it's just some fucking spider, really.
Now, I read the book. Don't get me wrong. I read the book because, well, it's Stephen King. But the movie, you don't see me right now, Jesse, but I am flipping you the bird.
You really need to watch the movie.
Fuck you.
It actually, I mean, it's not much better than the book, but
Which one are we talking about now?
It
Scared the shit out of me.
It is the reason I don't like clowns.
And one of these days, I'm gonna show up at your place dressed up as a clown,
That's okay. One of these days, I'm gonna
Can I
show
be
up
there
at your
with you,
place
Jesse?
dressed as Alma.
and you will get shot.
Yeah.
Oh my god, Jesse, you hate Alma as much as I do. What
I
about
am
Necromorphs?
terrified of little girls in red dresses with creepy white hair.
What about
that
Necromorphs?
shit? See, necromorphs don't fucking bug me, because you're like, okay, it's a fucking necromorph, I need to kill that thing before it kills me. A little girl in a red dress, you're like, okay, is she gonna burst into flames in a minute? Do I need to run? What's going on here?
No, she's gonna wait until.
Do what?
You got cut off there.
I think you got distracted.
Yeah. You know, creepy. Does anybody remember Alia from Dune when she was a kid?
Yes.
Yes, the little girl
Oh,
that
yeah.
was the yes. Oh my god.
Alia, when she stabs the guy with the little ring thing she has.
Gold Jabbar.
Yeah, she's creepy.
I agree.
I fully agree. Oh my god.
So
Yes.
my oldest just went and saw The Conjuring 2 the night it opened.
I want to see that, but I'm gonna wait for it to come out on video.
Dude, she said Savannah's not one for, I mean, scary movies don't bother her, and she said it scared the shit out of her.
And it's really funny that you say that, because Chris and I were, when the first one came out, the first Conjuring came out, we were both talking about how very desensitized I am to horror movies, because, you know, like with World War Z or whatever, any horror movie comes out and they're like, oh, this is the, you know, scariest horror movie since blah 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 blah. They said that about, you know, the Paranormal Activity movies. They said that about Mama. Granted, Mama will now have me checking under my bed and in my closet every night before I go to sleep, but it takes a lot to scare me now. Then we watched The Conjuring, and I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not quite so desensitized anymore, because
Yeah, Savannah
that
said 2 is
movie
worse.
fucking scared the shit out of me.
The Conjuring made me jump a couple times. I was fairly impressed.
She said the second one is even worse. The first one didn't bother her so much. The second one scared her.
See, that gives me hope.
And the thing, you know, one of my movies is Carrie. We were talking about adaptation books to movie is the Carrie from Stephen King.
As a good adaptation or a bad one?
Well, I was 5. I saw it when it first came out, and it gave me nightmares for years.
The one that did it for me, shit you not, I was 12 years old when it came out, or when I seen it.
User disconnected from your channel.
Evil Dead.
Haven't seen that one.
Who'd we lose? Oh, Stewart. He may come back.
Chris, come back.
No, Stewart.
There were some things in Evil Dead that might be disturbing to people, yes.
You know what's funny is I'm almost 45 years old, and I still can't watch Carrie, the original one.
It's a great movie. The remake wasn't bad either.
The remake made me laugh.
Cujo was pretty bad too.
Yeah, Cujo was.
Yeah, Cujo maybe not like Saint Bernard dogs.
Pet Cemetery was pretty good too, if on the eerie side of things.
It was a good movie, better book though.
Yeah, I'll agree with Matt on that one. I'll have to agree with Matt on that one. It was a good movie, great book.
Yeah, book was 100% better. I just introduced my youngest to Stephen King as a writer.
Really? She didn't know that?
No, she's only 16, and she has one hell of an imagination. I didn't need her getting to it any earlier.
If you're looking for a publisher, right here. Blame Salem. She said I could plug myself as much as I wanted to.
Hey, go right ahead. I mean, you know, if a lot of people don't know from listening to the last podcast, they will very quickly find out. Matt runs a company with Rachel called MFG, Meztrailov Fantasy Gaming.
I'm so proud that you got that right on the first shot.
And when I was talking to Matt about doing the podcast, you know, we talked a couple weeks beforehand, and then after last week's show, he and I got to talking, and the executive decision on my behalf was to bring both Matt and Rachel on as co-hosts as well. So, like, if there's ever a time when I can't be on, or if Jesse can't be on, or something like that, we've got one of 4 hosts, you know, that we can have on the show. Like, you know, if say for some odd reason, you know, next show, which I'll get to that in just a moment. The next show is going to be Final Fantasy 14 versus WoW. Like, if I can't show up for that, I don't know if Matt and Rachel have played either game. Jesse, I know Jesse's played both games.
WoW, but mainly my experience.
You cut off again.
Damn it! I blame my goddamn keyboard. My expertise is kind of in.
And you did it again.
Damn it! I'm just gonna see how long it takes before the fucker cuts out. Give me a.
Perfect timing.
Right.
That didn't take long.
I think what he's trying to say is his expertise is more with Final Fantasy
Gotcha.
than with WoW. But even then, that Final Fantasy, he and I haven't really done the online versions of it, but we've done more like 13, Lightning Returns, 7,
Read the chat.
8, that kind of thing.
Right. So, I mean, yeah. As it stands right now, we are, exactly as Chris stated, we are at the 2-hour mark. We try to keep the shows around 2 hours because trying to upload anything more than that to YouTube is a pain in the ass. You know, from firsthand experience, because it took me almost a full day to upload the first show. Is there... I will pose this very last question to everybody's here. Unfortunately, we did lose Stewart. However, you know, thank you, Stewart, for being on the show. Really appreciate it. I'm actually, you know, glad that I was able to have you on as my special guest because of the role you played in my life of, you know, introducing me to this genre of fantasy. That all being said, I will pose this last question to everybody, and everybody has to answer. Out of the entirety of the fantasy genre, what is your favorite race or monster? Be it elves, dragons, chimera, whatever.
That's a really good question.
Mine is elves.
Okay, Becca says elves.
I'm going to have to agree with her because every single character I've played, granted in Final 14 they're called Elzen, but yeah, pointy ears.
All
Elves?
of my WoW characters are elves.
All my D&D characters are elves.
Mine too.
Yep, same here. Chris, what's your favorite?
I'm gonna go a different direction. It's one of two things, and both of them are from Dungeons and Dragons. So you old school guys that have played it will know what both of these are. Either a mimic or a gelatinous cube.
Oh,
I love
yes.
those for my players.
Both of them, classics.
Yes,
I have
very
to
much
agree.
so.
You got your dragons, you got your elves, you got your dwarves, you got your orcs or whatever. But I wanted something more. How shall I say this? Different.
Right.
Well, just
Mimics
say it
are
this way.
awesome.
For my wife, she hates mimics. Ever since that first treasure chest tried to eat her.
I think everybody's had a treasure chest trying to eat her that's played D&D.
Yep, absolutely. Jesse, what about yours?
Honestly, I can't say that I really have one specifically because, in my mind, they are each great in their own way.
Good
That's
answer.
a cheater.
But he's also not a fan
Very
of
politically
fantasy.
correct.
What was that, Matt?
Not cheating if he's technically not a fan of fantasy.
True enough.
True. Matt,
I'm-
what would
I'm
you
more
say yours
sci-fi,
is?
So.
Say again, Salem?
What would you say your favorite race or creature from the fantasy realm?
Dragon or werewolf?
Harpies are pretty cool enemies.
What are?
Harpies.
Harpies? Yeah. Harpies are very predictable.
Harpies. Good one.
Yep. Rachel?
Honestly, I guess I would. I don't even really know. I would say elves, but at the same time, I kind of feel like my preferences kind of drifted away from it, but not. I don't know to what.
How about hobbit for your feet?
Just because my feet are small does not mean hobbit.
And hobbits don't have small feet. Hobbits' feet are really large.
Yeah.
Chris, you're on my side.
Yeah, no, sorry, hobbits have big feet.
Yeah, hobbits do have big feet.
Yes, I know.
My answer to that question, now that everybody's had a chance to answer, mine is respectively dragons and fairies.
Why the fairies, if you don't mind me asking?
Because she's a hippie.
Fair enough.
It actually and my answer actually for both races it actually falls back onto my religion. I have been a practicing witch since I was 16 years old, and to me, dragons and any other, pagan, witch, whatever, Wiccan, whatever you want to call yourself, to me they are real entities. They're real creatures, real beings. And fairies remind me, like, yes, I know that there's, just like with everything, there's the good fairy and the bad fairy, but the fairies, that you get, by the way, Stewart just sent me a message. The power went out at his house, so that's why he kind of he disappeared without a word. But fairies can be very, very playful if given the right offerings. They can also be at the same time very vindictive.
They can be vindictive bitches.
Yeah, they can. And the same with dragons. Dragons can be either good or bad. It also depends on, dragons have this thing of it depends on how much they respect you as a person. as to whether or not they will imbue you with their knowledge. And that crosses over so that my love, you know, from the religious aspect of it, my love of these two creatures stems over and kind of bleeds into my fantasy realm, you know, of being fantasy. I love everything dragons and I love everything fairies. So, I mean, yeah, that's kind of where, you know, my love of both of those come from. Is the
my house lately.
Huh?
It's Smog for president.
What'd you say, Beck?
Good thing you haven't been to my house lately. That the fairies and dragons have taken over.
So, but yeah, I mean, that's where mine comes from. So, but anyways, we are going to go ahead and close out the show. Guys, I want to thank you, Shaddris, Chris, and Becca. Thank you so much for being, and Stewart. Thank you guys so much for being guests on the show this week. Greatly appreciate it. Jesse, Matt, and Rachel.
I'll be back, what, next week?
Actually in 2 weeks, July 2nd. July 2nd is our next podcast. The topic of that podcast is going to be Final Fantasy XIV versus WoW. As far as, you know, MMOs go. Because right now, those are the two biggest names in MMORPGs. And so, yeah, that's what our next show is going to be about. Again, that's going to be recorded on July 2nd. But as it stands right now, guys, thank you so very much. I'm actually... You guys humble me so much within the last, you know, 2 weeks from the first podcast to now, about how popular. I never thought that the podcast would, you know, take off like it has, and it has. And I have people all the time sending me messages, you know, about ideas, or, you know, they said that they've listened to the podcast, the first one, and they absolutely loved it. And it's just... You know, Chris and I talk on a regular basis. I've gone through and I have seasons 1 and 2 actually scheduled out. So, I mean, I look forward to the next 2 years. Other than that, again, I'm Sister Salem. You guys can call me Salem for short. On behalf of Geeks and Things and Jesse, Matt, and Rachel, thank you, and good night.
Likewise, night, everybody.
Good night.